has concluded. Those are the housekeeping rules. Our speaker today is John Collins. John is a hardware program manager for Microsoft on the HoloLens team in Silicon Valley, leading the research and development of battery technologies for augmented reality products. Prior to joining HoloLens, John worked as an electrical engineering lead for the motherboard and hard drive for the Xbox 360 and Xbox One, and at Apple, managing the development of the battery for the iPhone, iPad, and iPod line of products. He has trained hundreds on the processes, tools, and best practices necessary to create high-volume consumer electronics. He has been an IEEE and Consumer Electronics Society member since 2008 and was president of the IEEE and Eta Kappa Nu Electrical Engineering Honor Society student chapters at the University of Texas at San Antonio. He also co-founded Daily Lovelies with his wife, a startup that provides custom-tailored cosmetics for special occasions. He is passionate about consumer electronics and the future of virtual and augmented reality. And with this, I will now turn it over to John.
Thank you, Diana. I'd like to present this as a forum for ways and tips for landing your dream job. I've been very fortunate that I'm able to work on the HoloLens. This is the future of computing, the future of mixed reality, where the digital world and the real world are blended together seamlessly. This is my dream, but these tips and this advice that I'll be presenting throughout this conversation will also help you in landing your dream job. So I want to first start off by giving a little bit of background on myself and talking about how I adapted to different types of experiences that I've had throughout my career. So I started off as a young child loving video games and video game hardware. This image right here is E3. E3 is the Electronic Entertainment Expo. It's where all the industry leaders come together and they talk about and they present all their latest announcements. And I eagerly awaited this every year around June, where all the latest video game hardware was shown off, and it was the first time that consumers really got to see what would be the future of video games and video game development. And I was so passionate about this space, like many of you are probably. And I really wanted to have the opportunity to work in the video game field. So this is my dream at an early age. I talked with my father about this, and he said, well, you can do this while being an engineer. And so I thought about this further, and I found out that there's actually a lot of perks to being an engineer, as some of you may know. This can include the ability to work anywhere in the world. So if you have a passion and a drive for travel or for experiencing different cultures, being an engineer can be a wonderful stepping stone to that. There's also job security. Due to engineers being in such high demand, there is job security in a lot of the different types of engineering fields, like electrical engineering or compliance engineering or safety engineering or one of the other related fields. And there's also great benefits at these companies. Because these engineers are in such high demand, you'll see a lot of these companies that they can offer free food, or you can work in great buildings, or you can get excellent health care for you and for your family. There's also a variety in the roles. So if you're interested in doing electrical engineering, but maybe later in your career you have a passion for safety, or if you have a passion for making products better with mechanical engineering, or being a manager or a team lead or a program manager, all those opportunities are available to you while getting an engineering foundation. So that really interested me, because I'd like to experience new things and have the opportunity to grow myself into different roles. And it also has a strong salary with only a bachelor's degree. You can also go on for a master's or for a PhD or for a postdoctoral, and those can even afford you even stronger salaries. And so this is something that you can do immediately with just a bachelor's. So there's a lot of perks to being an engineer, and I knew that I could achieve the goals and the companies that I wanted to work for while being one. But what I didn't realize until I really started going into engineering and started applying for some of these jobs is that the global competition is incredibly fierce. Everyone wants the same jobs that I do. There are 2 million applications per year to Google. Microsoft and Apple and other similar companies have numbers that are around the same. And these companies are hiring the best people from around the world. They have the money and they have the resources to hire the best and brightest and to move them or to move their families and to try to get the best possible talent from all the best locations around the world. And so the global competition for these jobs is just almost unfathomable. It's actually harder to get into Google, 10 times harder than it is to get into Harvard. And so what can you do to compete? So as I go through these steps, I'm going to be giving you some advice and some tips and tricks in order to get noticed and to get your foot in the door at these companies. So first off, while I was in college, I participated in many extracurricular activities. This was a differentiator between me and my peers. I was president of the IEEE student chapter. I was president of the Eta Kappa Nu, that's Engineering Honor Society student chapter. I also participated in our robotics club, and I led that organization, and we competed, and we did very well in that activity. And just because I was passionate about it as well, I also wrote for the school newspaper, not because it was a requirement, not as a resume booster, but it was something that I was just interested in. So I wrote about consumer electronics and about technology and trying to inform others about the latest news. But it's not simply just a matter of going there and getting the free pizza. You also have to lead those organizations. Be an officer. Start off by being one of the smaller roles where maybe the time commitment isn't as much, and do that for a year and see how that goes. And if it's something that you really enjoy and something that you want to be a bigger part of it, then really take an active, strong leadership role in those organizations. Because the fact of the matter is, at those other universities and those other companies, there's going to be employees that are not doing these things. These are differentiators for yourself, and they're things that you can always carry with you on your resume. But it's also important to study hard and to get the best grades possible that you can. So when I did those activities, it landed me my first internship, where I had the opportunity to build vehicle simulators in a location that was nearby my school. And so it was kind of like a co-op internship. So it was after school. It was a few days a week. And that sounds really cool. And it was interesting at first, but then I realized that I wasn't challenged in the role. The company was very small, and they had never had an intern before. And they didn't know how to properly manage down to an intern, and I didn't know how to manage up to my coworkers at the time. So there was a lot of confusion about roles and responsibilities and expectations. So that ended up making my internship not really that great, but it opened the right doors. Once you have that first internship, it's much easier to get that second internship and that third internship, and then to land that dream position. So this was a stepping stone. I knew I wasn't going to work there forever, but it was something where I had the opportunity to learn and to grow my personal skills and my technical skills. So this brings me to my first disappointment when I started in my career, where I had that first internship, and then I started applying at a lot of different places, and I started getting some more interviews. And I had the opportunity to get an interview with a government agency, and the background process and the application process was very intense. It took almost a year for it, and I was positive that I was going to get the role. Everything was going really smoothly, and I thought this was going to be my career, and I'm really, really excited about this. But I ended up not getting that position, and that was a huge disappointment in my life, and I thought that, well, my career is now going to be negatively affected by this. But it turned out that once one door closed, there was many more that opened up in its place. And it's just something that, as a fact of the matter, is when you're applying for these places, that rejection is very, very common just due to the number of applicants or things that might be outside of your control. And so it's important to continue trying. But during that same summer, I also got an interview with Microsoft. So Microsoft simply came to a career fair at my university, and this was an opportunity where instead of being one of 2 million other applicants that are applying online, I now have the opportunity to talk with an employee there, talk with a recruiter that's interested in hiring people that day, and to give them a chance to see myself and get to know me. So I gave him my resume, I talked with him for a little bit, and I didn't think anything of it. I honestly wasn't that confident that it was going to proceed any further. But then I ended up getting a phone interview. And at the phone interview, they were asking me questions about keyboards and about mice. And I really wasn't interested in working on PC accessories. There was other consumer electronics that I would much rather work for, and including Xbox, which was this was well before HoloLens was thought of, but Xbox was going to be my dream, and that's what I really wanted to do. And so I told him that is the team that I want to work for, and the interviewer actually laughed at me. He said that everyone wants to work there. The chances of me working there are slim to none. And that was disappointing. But I said, well, this could be a better internship opportunity. It would be for the summer. Even if I am working on PC accessories, that could be something that I could still learn a lot from. So I had, they called me out to come to an on-site interview in Seattle. And the way that these interview processes work with a lot of these big tech companies is you go through a phone interview and then you go through an on-site interview. And after that, they then decide whether to have you or not for the internship. So they fly me out to Seattle, and there was actually a really, really bad weather storm. And I ended up trying to get to my interview site really early just to make sure that I had enough time to be there and to prepare. And power was out, actually, across the Microsoft campus. And one of the full-time employees came in and said, hey, we're not going to be doing interviews today. No one's coming in. There's no power. So I had flown from Texas all the way up to Seattle, and then the following day I flew back. It was a long flight. And then 2 weeks later I came back out for my in-person interview. And my first interview in the morning, it was kind of a preparation with a different recruiter. And they said that I would be interviewing for the Xbox team, which was, to my surprise, I wasn't expecting that. And I had been preparing, for like PC type of questions, but I had to learn how to adapt and to really try to nail this interview. And it's an 8-hour process. You're going through interview after interview after interview with 8 to 12 different people, and it can be very intense and very intimidating. And I gave it my all. I wasn't sure how I did, but I was very fortunate in that they wanted me to come in for the actual summer for the internship. Now, internship is not a guarantee for full-time employment. You still have to do a great job at your internship at Microsoft, and then at the end they give you a recommendation to get hired as a full-time employee or not. And so it was kind of like now I was going through like a real 3-month interview process. And what I realized is that the internship was amazing for me. I was given tasks and duties that were really well-tuned for being able to do this as a college student and be able to complete it in a 2 to 3 month period. And I also met a lot of great people. There was a lot of really fun intern events, and I learned a lot. And then it actually got super fun. At the end of the internship, Microsoft always does some secret, really fun event for all the interns. And my year, we all got to go to Bill Gates' house and have a barbecue. So I got to meet him, ask him some questions, and I got to talk with the president of the Xbox division, and we were chatting about games the whole time. It was just an amazing, memorable opportunity. And I really feel like the culture and the team that I was working on really meshed well. And so I was very happy that at the end of my internship, they offered me a full-time job once I was done with my final year of school, which is also great because then I don't need to apply for any more jobs. It's a lot less stressful your final year, and you can just enjoy having your last few classes. So this was kind of a stepping stone into getting bigger and better things as well. So that first internship landed me a second internship, which landed me a full-time position. And when I started working as a full-time employee at Microsoft, I was working as an electrical engineer, and I realized that there was this other role called program managers. And these were team leads. They were responsible for everything from status to schedule to budget to presentations and everything in between. And it was something that I thought really meshed well with my personality and my interests. And so I wanted to transition from being an electrical engineer on the Xbox team to a program manager on the Xbox team. And so I talked with the head of the program management group, and I said, hey, I want to be a program manager. How do I become one? And she said, well, you really need to have a solid foundation in engineering first. You'll be a better PM for that. And so I had just completed school, and now I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but now I'm being told that I need to have a foundation in electrical engineering at first. And so I asked him how many years of experience should I have, and he recommended 5 or more. And so that was also really hard to hear because I knew what I wanted to do, but now I'm going to have to wait an additional 5 years in order to get there. So that came into disappointment number 2, and at the time I was really disheartened to hear that. But in hindsight, that was excellent advice. I feel like the best program managers are people with an engineering foundation, and so they're able to understand the technical details and understand really the projects that they're leading. And so that's what I did. So for the following years, I worked as an engineer on the Xbox 360, Xbox 360 Slim. I worked on Kinect and Xbox One. So during those programs, I led the hard drive development, I did motherboards, I did validation, and I also wanted to try to get my foot in the door as quickly as possible into program management. So I took an opportunity to be a software program manager role in the Xbox team, where I had the chance to develop new tools and new processes that would be used both internally and externally at Microsoft to help out with hardware development. And that led me to disappointment number 3, because I had been a software program manager now for about a year. I really wanted to get into hardware program management, and there was no opportunities that were open yet in the Xbox team. So I had worked in the Xbox group for around 5 or 6 years, and I really wanted to see what else was out there. So I started applying at different places, and that's where I just kind of on a whim, I applied for a job at Lego. I was really passionate about Xbox, and I'm also passionate about Lego, so I said, okay, well, let's kind of give this a shot. And the position was in Balloon, Denmark. I didn't even know where Denmark was on a map when I applied for the job. I simply said, okay, well, let's kind of just see how this goes. And to my surprise, actually, they called me in for, they wanted to do a Skype interview. And due to the time change, it was like 4 p.m. in Denmark, and I think it was 6 a.m. in Seattle. And it was, I had just woken up doing this interview, this phone interview. The interview process was a little bit different. It was 2 people on their side interviewing me. And then they wanted to do a video interview. And, like, I'm in my pajamas, my hair's all crazy. I had just woken up, and the video quality was cutting in and out. It was really bad. And I was like, okay, well, that was an awful experience. That isn't going to progress any further. And then, to my surprise, they wanted me to come out for an in-person interview. And I also had to kind of learn how to adapt to this one, because they didn't give me any details about arranging the flight or about how to get there. They just said, show up to this building at this time. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to pay thousands of dollars for, like, my own plane ticket. And I tried contacting my interviewer, and they are not responding. And so then I went on LinkedIn. I tried finding some other Lego recruiters, and they said, oh, yeah, that person's on vacation for the past month, and you're going to have to just book it, and then we'll reimburse you. And so I was like, okay. So I ended up booking my ticket. This was now like 4 days before my interview, and that's how long kind of like this process took. And I fly out to Denmark, and I do the in-person interview, and then I realized that the role wasn't really a good cultural fit for me. The job description and the job responsibilities were a little bit different than what I was expecting, and I didn't get the position. And so that was kind of a disappointment, another major disappointment in my career, where I had something that I was really excited about, I really wanted to do. I thought it was going to be a great change for me and for my family, but I didn't end up getting the position, and it wasn't a great fit. And so these are just part of other things that you kind of have to adapt to. But I continued kind of keeping my eyes open for different positions, and then Apple contacted me on LinkedIn for an engineering program manager position. So this is a hardware role doing program management. That's exactly what I wanted to do. But this position was going to be in Silicon Valley. I was living in Seattle at the time. My wife was also pregnant, and we were thinking about buying a house at the time. We had all our friends that were in Seattle, and so this was going to be a major life change for us if we ended up doing it. but I thought this is good for my career, and my family was supportive of it. So when my wife was 8 months pregnant, we drove down with our 2 dogs and moved to Silicon Valley. I don't recommend this in hindsight because this was a very tough time just due to having to find like a new doctor for the baby that was about to come, and for we were living in temporary housing at the time when our son was born, and that was really tough. But having that local family support can be really beneficial. And I consider Apple to be like my program management boot camp. It was an opportunity to see how another company makes high-volume consumer electronics that are well-loved, that people are passionate about, that really they know how to do everything automated and to make the highest quality product. So I learned a lot in this opportunity, and I had the chance to work on the iPod Touch, on the iPhone SE, the iPad Pro, and a Beats speaker program, all on the battery side. So all those teams had different cultures, and it was really eye-opening to kind of see how these different teams work together. And then Microsoft contacted me back about a year later to say, we want you to work on HoloLens. This is our new augmented reality, mixed reality device, and we want you to lead our battery program management efforts. So very similar to what I was doing at Apple, but now coming back in where I was familiar with some of the culture of the team, but I wanted to have the opportunity to work on a new product category, something that had never been done before. And I've always been really excited about the augmented reality and virtual reality space. And so this career trajectory was a little bit kind of a roundabout. It was full of disappointments here and there. But overall, I was able to land my dream job by learning how to adapt and to be flexible here. So I want to conclude my presentation with just some tips for landing that dream job for yourself. Most resumes are passed over for even strong candidates, and that's no fault of your own. That's just due to the nature of the job application systems, unfortunately, for these. When you're having millions of applications per year, it's just hard to get noticed in it. So there's ways that you can do, there's things that you can do to get noticed. That can include making sure your LinkedIn profile is complete and that you're well connected. So just a little bit of background on the way LinkedIn works. LinkedIn is the major tool that recruiters use to be able to find candidates. And the focus that I have on LinkedIn is to purely get noticed by a recruiter. That's your only objective. So with that, it kind of works on the Kevin Bacon principle, where it's based on how many hops or how many ties you are to connected peers together. So for example, if you're friends with someone and they're friends with someone, and that friend is connected to a recruiter at Facebook, for example, then you'll be on their profile. And the more people you have that are shared connections, the higher up you'll be whenever the recruiter's doing that search. And so it's really important that you're well connected on LinkedIn, that you have a complete profile. LinkedIn is not a resume. It is a service for recruiters to be able to find people. So you don't need to worry about like the 1 or 2 page limit. You can have things that are fully complete. I recommend putting down everything that you can onto LinkedIn, but make sure it's well organized and that it's clear and queryable by the recruiter, and that it has the right keywords. From LinkedIn, I've been contacted over my years by a variety of companies, including like Google, Apple, HP, Amazon, Tesla, Disney, and Facebook, and a bunch of startups. So all of the big companies have contacted me based on my profile. But it's also important that you can go to industry events. This is another way that you can talk with and get to meet recruiters or meet other people that are well connected in the industry. So this can include IEEE conferences. IEEE puts on many conferences throughout the year that are in a variety of engineering areas. And so, and they also have things for recent college hires, for college students, and then for people that have been in industry for many, many years. So no matter where you are in your career, there's a lot of opportunities that are there. Depending upon where you live, also, if you live in a major metropolitan area, there can be a variety of meetups that you can go to in a lot of different areas. And that's another great place to meet other people that are within your same engineering career fields or in places where you want to be. And it's really important to get that pixie dust for your career. What I call that pixie dust is, for me, it was like my Microsoft internship. The Microsoft internship opened up the doors to the Microsoft FTE role, and then that opened up the doors for Apple, and then Apple opened up the doors for coming back to Microsoft. So that was my pixie dust. So pixie dust can be, for example, if you want to get into the virtual reality field, and it's really hard to get that first virtual reality job, do a virtual reality project on your own at first, and then you can have that on your resume, you can have that on LinkedIn profile, and now you'll start being noticed by recruiters. The job of a recruiter is to place the best candidate as fast as possible that's going to be able to ramp up as quickly as possible and get the job done. So showing that you have expertise and skills and experience in an area that they're looking for is vital and will make you stand out in getting noticed. But that's my pixie dust, was trying to get into the gaming and getting into the VR field. Your pixie dust can be dependent upon whatever you want to work, but it's really important to just, once you're in one of those major companies, if that's where you want to work, it's much easier to get a job in one of the other major companies because you'll be noticed. There's a stigma that's, for right or for wrong, that the hiring bar is very high at a lot of these places, and so once you have your foot in the door, it's there's kind of you've already kind of met and exceeded those expectations, and so they believe that you'll be easier to get into and be a better fit into their companies. And so because of that, it's really important to get that pixie dust on your resume. So with that said, this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to help answer any Q&A that people might have. In addition to this, I can help answer questions as well that are related to maybe Silicon Valley, Microsoft culture, further tips on LinkedIn, or anything else that people might have questions about. Thank you.
Hi, John. This is Diana. So we have one question that has come in so far, and we have two questions. I've asked for one of them to be clarified. But the first one, and everyone who is listening, please feel free to submit your questions now while I'm reading this one out to John so we can get a few more answered. So we had a question asking, I did an internship in my master's. Is it really going to affect chances of getting a full term? I think that means full-time, like a job. To keep myself busy, I did self-paced courses in the summer.
Oh, that's excellent. So you did a couple of things that a lot of your peers didn't. So having an internship in your master's degree program, that's an excellent way to get started. And then also doing those additional classes, that just shows that you are passionate about your field, that you are going above and beyond what's required, and that while other people might be relaxing during the summer, you're continuing your education, continuing learning. So I think those are great steps in order to get noticed and to do differentiators. In addition to that, I do recommend, it's always great to, especially if you're going to a software role, software engineering, if that's your interest, or software program management role, especially, to have side projects. It doesn't have to be something that is some brand new innovative idea. It can be something that maybe you created a robot, following a tutorial that was online, or you've contributed to some open source projects and you have your code up on GitHub. Having something that you can demonstrate and show that you have done personal side projects in an area that you're interested in is a huge, huge win. So I do recommend that in addition to what you've already done.
Okay, thanks, John. So far we have one more question. It's pretty broad, but how does one get noted? That was submitted. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'm going to interpret this as how to get noticed more, maybe in the professional world. This can be hard too, because when you're a college hire, you're in a smaller bucket, and so there's companies that are looking for specifically college students, and so not having years of experience there, they're looking for a certain skill set, and so it's all about trying to get noticed, to your point. And so going to a career fair, for example, when you're a college hire is easier, but how do you do that in the professional world? So I really recommend that having the opportunities to showcase your experiences in your projects. So for example, going to conferences, presenting at conferences if you can, joining meetups, maybe having a side project if that's allowed under your company's rules. Moonlighting can sometimes be okay, sometimes not. It depends upon your work if they allow it. But having an opportunity, for example, like something that I did was I created a Windows Phone app just on the side. That was an opportunity for me to see what phone development was like, to go through the certification process, to use some app development tools. The app wasn't great. I mean, basically, it was just kind of a scraper for this one website, and it would display things in a certain user interface. But I learned a lot, actually, from that brief project, and that's something that is outside of just kind of your normal day-to-day duties. And so now you're able to kind of be like a jack of all trades once you're able to have a lot of breadth in a lot of different areas. And so that's something that you can do to get noticed in outside of just your specific career field is, especially if you want to jump into other areas, is to, a lot of times these companies won't necessarily like take a bet on you if you don't have any experience in that first. So you're going to have to prove yourself. And by doing that, you, like, for example, let's say you wanted to work at Google on Android development. It's a great thing to work on Android apps, and I know a lot of people that have started that way, basically, where they were already knowledgeable about the tool set, they were already knowledgeable about the pros and cons of that development environment, and then they've expanded on that, and now they have roles working at those companies because of their personal projects that they've done. So that's my recommendation is especially if you're trying to jump into new areas, is to go above and beyond what might be required in your day-to-day duties. Some of the things that I've done, and this is also just kind of good for your career field, is I'm very passionate about intellectual property and about creating new ideas and inventorship. So something that I've done outside of my current role, where my main focus on day-to-day is on batteries for our HoloLens program, is I started up a forum at work with some friends, some coworkers that are friends, and we meet a couple hours each week and we talk about various ideas that might be applicable to HoloLens. And then out of that, we try to submit patents on those ideas. And it's a personal project. It's something that I'm passionate about, but it's also good for my career and it's good for Microsoft as a whole. And so it's something that if you're able to do it for work and your manager's very supportive of you expanding out and trying to get noticed, that can be a great opportunity. But if not, try to take time in your personal life if you can to have projects that might be relevant to your future career interests. So I hope that answers your question.
Hey, John, we have one more. Given that I have already graduated and my only internship experience is one similar to your first, not challenging or pixie dust quality, should I be ambitious with my first job, look for the Microsoft-esque type first job, or settle for a lower job to get experience first as a stepping stone for a more ideal job later?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my recommendation is to do both in parallel. When you're applying for these jobs, the best time to get a job is when you already have a job. It can be harder when you have maybe personal financial commitments and or family commitments, and you might not be able to be, I guess, as flexible, or you really need a job as quickly as possible. So I recommend to apply for both of those in parallel. A lot of times these jobs, they can take many, many months from the time that you first apply to the time that you actually are starting to work and you get your first paycheck. My experience, I've seen it takes around, startups might be a little bit faster, but it can take around 4 months from the time that you have been initially contacted by a recruiter to the time that you have scheduled all the different rounds of interviews, gone in, they've given you an offer, you might counter that offer, think about it, and then reply back, and then give your 2 weeks notice, and then start working. So it can take a really, really long time. So I think it might come down to a personal decision about whether you start, at the less pixie dust job in order to get started. I don't recommend to have gaps of employment in your work history if you can avoid it. So if there's some interviews that are going on and they're at a pixie dust company and they are taking a little too long, and you have an offer from maybe a not pixie dust company or one that you don't feel is a good fit for you, it's fair to tell the other parties that you're actively interviewing, and that a lot of times that can accelerate the process. Sometimes they can make shortcuts. The recruiters have some knobs and dials that they can turn in order to make things go a little bit faster. They can get you responses quicker if they know that they might lose a good candidate. So I do recommend to apply for both. That also allows you to have leverage in your negotiating for salary as well. So if you have one job offer and maybe it's higher pay, but there's less benefits or less vacation or something, you can use that as leverage, for the other company. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. But good luck to you. That's a really good one.
I have 2 more questions so far.
Sure.
You've given some great advice on networking and getting noticed. Do you have any practical advice on resumes, cover letters, or the application process in general?
Yeah. So another great question. They're a pain in the butt. Everyone hates writing resumes. Everyone hates applying for jobs. So the method that I take is, and just to caveat this also, there's always counter arguments to resume writing. There's a lot of people that say you should have this section, or you shouldn't have this section, or that's the old school way to do it, or this is the current way to do it. The way that I do it is resumes are only read for around 10 to 30 seconds. I try to make it as clear, as easily readable as possible. Generally, the advice is that you should have 1 page for every 10 years of experience. Again, I wouldn't have like half a page if you're just coming out of college. I try to expand it out with maybe some personal projects or some of your classes that you've done. But about 1 page. If you have patents or if you have publications, that's a great addendum or like a bottom half of the 2nd page or on the 3rd page. But the goal is to just make it as clear as possible. I don't have an objective section on my resume. Sometimes people argue that you should. But I think that if I'm already applying for a job, a lot of times with the LinkedIn, if they're contacting me and I'm sending in my resume, they don't need an objective because I'm not applying blindly, like in a system. I think it's a little bit redundant because an objective is like, you want this job. So I removed that section. You should have it categorized by, there's different ways of doing this, but some people recommend to go with your most recent job experience and then go down to your oldest job experience. The oldest job experience might be on your bottom of your 1st page or on the 2nd page. Other schools of thought say that you should have your most relevant job experience to be first. So maybe you had some really relevant project or really relevant task, but might not have been your most recent job duties, but including that up to be first. I think what's more important is that resumes can often kind of times be like just a talking point or a reference material because they're not going to be looked at, they're not going to be fully read by the people at the interview and by the recruiter, and they need to have like a resume in their system a lot of times. And so I recommend that a resume is really used for you to be able to have in front of you during an interview or during a phone screen where it's reference material, it's the bullet points of the major highlights of your career. With those bullet points, this is strong advice that I recommend. This kind of comes out of the Google playbook for their interviewing process, is every bullet point on your resume should say what you did, how you did it, and what was the impact that it made. So for example, you could say, like on hard drives, for example. I'm just making this up. When I worked on hard drives for Xbox, I wrote the validation plan for the Xbox 360 by integrating like a cross-functional group of stakeholders for alignment. So that was how I did it. And the impact was that it improved our test time and reduce down the number of errors by 20%. It's really good to try to quantify things if you can. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but kind of do your best guess as to like how much time you might have saved, how much money you might have saved with that, because then that really shows, wow, you know, this person they've really thought about each one of their duties, and they have an impact that they've made to the organization. So for every bullet point on your resume, I recommend doing that. So that what that might end up happening is you have less bullet points overall. A resume should not read like a job description. It shouldn't be like attend meetings. It should not say you know, like write validation plans. It should be that what you did, how you did it, and what was the impact. So I hope that clarifies for resumes. For cover letters, a cover letter is your opportunity to provide a personal story. They're typically one page, a few paragraphs about why you're a good fit for the role. Cover letters, in my experience, have been read more than resumes. It's kind of your opportunity to bring out those 1, 2, 3 major highlights out of your career and to summarize that and how that might be a perfect fit for the role. Cover letters are for your opportunity to be personal and to really talk about why you're a good fit. There's a lot of examples for good templates for cover letters and for resumes. I recommend checking them out and then modifying it as needed for your use, but I hope that helps you.
Okay, it looks like we have one last question, and it says, I have one question regarding your master's university. You were an RA over there. What skills must one possess to have that skill?
I assume RA means resident assistant. I don't have my master's degree. I just have a bachelor's, but my first job role was a resident assistant. Could the question, Eric, clarify that, and if that's what they wanted to know about being a resident assistant?
I can ask him to, because he wrote subsequently, what skills must one have to become an RA?
I can talk to that, I guess, a little bit until they respond, but a resident assistant is not related to engineering. It was my first kind of real job, I guess. I just simply applied. It was kind of like one of those just roles at my university where I liked it because I got free housing and free food. But a resident assistant allowed me to, it gave me the opportunity to really learn how to deal with conflict. And that's an important skill set throughout your career. There was residents that might have issues, and I needed to help resolve that and be able to talk through and work through a resolution. I don't put resident assistant on my resume because it's not relevant to my engineering positions. I do put it on my LinkedIn because LinkedIn is not a resume. I keep it more complete with my full job history. If you worked like in food service or something, I probably wouldn't put that unless you want to work at one of those companies, in corporate or something. But resident assistant, I do feel like I gain some skill sets that are relevant to what might be of use for my future employers. And so I put that on my LinkedIn for that reason, but I kind of hope that helps to clarify. There's no magic secret for the resident assistant. I just simply applied for it.
Okay. And we got in one last question, which I will go ahead and, okay, the person clarified they thought that it was resident analyst.
Oh, no, sorry, yeah. No, I was a computer systems analyst. Maybe I could talk a little bit about that one. Sorry, RA in my world is resident assistant, but for my first internship, the official job title was consumer systems analyst, or excuse me, computer systems analyst, but it was really like an internship or co-op. So to have that skill set, that was a very introductory engineering job. I simply just kind of applied on our internal school job website where they were looking for, specifically for college students. The thing about college students is I think companies that are knowledgeable or have had interns before or recent college hires, there there's not an expectation that that college hire, that intern is going to know a lot. Just due to the fact of the matter is, like, they've learned about a lot of different areas, but they don't have the depth technically maybe for what that company is specifically looking for. And so there's no expectation that you know, they're going to come in and they're going to completely, you know, change the world in terms of the way things are being done. But what's great is that they're coming in, they're moldable, they have a fresh set of eyes, and they're able to learn quickly. It's part of what is required for being a student. And so I think good companies will have an expectation for how to properly manage college hires and interns. But I hope that kind of answers your question, in that specifically for me, for that computer systems analyst, that was also kind of just another straightforward job where I gave them my resume. I didn't have any special skill set, and they were just looking for a local student to help them with, specifically with some Linux microcontroller stuff and some servo motors, things that they were doing for their vehicle simulator that I was working on. So the job requirements weren't really that strict.
And for our final question, since you pursued your MS, do you suggest that one seeks in a university its location or the courses offered?
Yeah, so I do not have a master's degree. I just have a bachelor's degree. But I do want to clarify, or maybe help to answer this question about its location or the courses there. That's a great question. I think this comes down to a personal choice. I think a lot of times family matters, or things might also kind of affect that decision. Personally, for me, you know, this is tough, and I'm just going to tell you about my personal experience. I don't know if I necessarily recommend this one way or another, but I'll just tell you a little bit of background. Is I got accepted when I was applying for schools, universities. I got into University of Texas at Austin's engineering program. It's one of the top 10 in the nation. I got into Texas A&M, which is also, I think it's like right after UT Austin, because I wanted to stay somewhat local to where my family lived, which was in San Antonio. Those were both within a drivable distance. And then I also applied for the engineering program at the University of Texas San Antonio, which was not nearly as highly ranked as the other universities. I was actually all set to go to the University of Texas at Austin. I had friends that were going there. It was the engineering program I wanted to get into. And kind of on a last-minute decision, I decided to stay local and to go to the University of Texas San Antonio. Even though my family lived about 30 minutes away from the university, I still wanted to have the kind of that college experience, so I stayed in the dorms there. I did a lot of extracurricular stuff, but I still went home on the weekends. That was just a personal choice for me. I also wanted the opportunity to be able to make a big impact in my university. And I did. I accomplished that, where I had the opportunity to become president of IEEE and president of Eta Kappa Nu in that group. So it's kind of the mentality of like a big fish in a smaller pond. You know, with UT Austin, you are going, if I went there, that would have had a large alumni network. Alumni networks can be an excellent way for landing your dream job. And there's alumni networks for a lot of these universities all around the world. But there's also the caveat in that those groups, for example, in the IEEE, they'll have hundreds of members, not like 50 or 75 members. And so when you want to be the president of IEEE at UT Austin, you might be competing against 10, you know, well-qualified people rather than one well-qualified person, maybe at the smaller school. And so with that, that was kind of like almost on a whim change that really affected my life for where I went to and the opportunities that came to me. When you go to one of the bigger, more prestigious universities, if you're allowed in, it's also going to be that can be like a pixie dust. So if you go to, for example, like any of like the top 30 schools, you're going to have recruiters from Microsoft and from Google that are going to be dedicated to your campus and going there and giving talks and doing recruiting efforts. That's not always the case with the smaller schools, and so that can be difficult just to get noticed. I give you a little bit of background. When I was an intern at Microsoft, there was another student who was from Berkeley, and she and I were if we did a good job at our internship, we would have been allowed to come back as full-time employees. There was 2 open positions for us, but we had to do good at our internship. And for her, simply because she went to Berkeley, which is an amazing engineering school, she got in. She didn't have to do a lot of those extracurricular activities. Well, for me, just to get noticed and to be able to get in, I had to do a lot of extracurricular activities. And she did not end up getting the position, unfortunately, but I did. And it wasn't that we were competing against each other. It's just that I think maybe the fact of the matter is, like, I was maybe used to working under higher pressure or working under maybe tight deadlines due to these other commitments that I had. And so I think that if you're coming from a university that is very prestigious, you're going to it's kind of already going to be that pixie dust. Like, for example, if you go to Stanford, pretty much any company is going to talk to you. You're going to get your foot in the door. It's not that you're going to necessarily get the position, but you will get the interviews. That's really what your university matters. Your grades matter a lot less after you've had your first position. You can keep it on there if your grades are spectacular, but if they're good or if they're average, it's okay to not have your grades on your resume after you get your first job out of college. And so you know, that kind of depends upon what you want to do. It can also be like financial commitment. You know, Stanford can cost $200,000 to go there. My university cost me $25,000 to go to, so 1/10 the cost, but I work with people every day that also went to the same university, so we have the same positions, but you know, that financial commitment and what's required might be also a factor in deciding on where you go to. So I hope that helps answer that question. That's kind of a long answer, but I think there's a lot of moving pieces to it.
All right, thanks so much, John. I'm not seeing any other questions. If anybody listening does have any questions at the conclusion, please feel free to email them to me and I can rally them off to John. John, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to give before we sign off?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for your attendance. I hope that this is helpful. If you would like to, we talked about on LinkedIn the number of hops that Kevin Bacon principle for that. If you would like to, please add me on LinkedIn. You can do a search for John Collins Microsoft on LinkedIn. I'll come up. Feel free to add me. I'll add you back. If you have any questions, you can contact me there or send a message to Diana. And I really want to thank you for your time, and I wish you the best of luck in your future careers.
Thank you so much, and thank you, John, for participating today, or for presenting today, rather. If you would like to see our future webinars, our next webinar will be tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern about virtual or remote teams, and we will have another Future Leaders Forum speaker, 2 speakers on September 22nd. We will be getting a presentation from Leo Zetto and Jonathan Chu at 2 p.m. on this 22nd, titled Knowing the Secret to Being a World Changer. Thank you all, everybody. I appreciate you logging on today, and I will be ending the webinar now.